and welcome to Soft Spot. The first part of parenting after the breakup concluded with us talking about the development of a plan. There has to be a plan, and oftentimes the plan that one does have in place during the course of the breakup, and again, the breakup begins before the actual removal of one of the persons from the environment. But then, once you get out of the environment, you are really exposed to many of the elements that you were once protected by when living in that environment. And what I mean by that is this. You already see where things are headed. You already are wrapped up in your emotions about the failed relationship, and many times it has failed long before you even walk out, sometimes years. And then you begin to process what it is that you're going to do to protect yourself from the various systems that you will be impacted by once leaving. And what I mean by that as well is, you know you're going to be faced with probably the courts. You know you're going to be faced with some of the things within the family system, such as her family, such as your own family, such as friends that you develop together, friends that have chosen sides of where they want to stand, who they want to stand with, and even some of your friends may stand on her side and vice versa. So there are a number of things to be faced with, but many of those things you anticipate. But to anticipate is one thing. To be faced with those things is another. Because people often try to get you back together. They try to be mediators between reestablishing the relationship between the two of you. But most importantly, the children are the ones who also get involved in the effort at trying to bring the two of you back together again. And somewhere along the line, one of you, if not both of you, which is preferred, but one of you has to put an end to all of the assumptions, I guess I would say well, let's just leave it at assumptions. I'll just say that there are a lot of assumptions made. There are a lot of positions that people begin to take in terms of what they think their roles are in bringing everyone together to try to get this worked out. But working out doesn't mean staying together. Not at this point. Once a person makes a decision to move out, that's it. And oftentimes, as I stated in the previous show, we go back and forth with one another. Sometimes we get involved with sleeping with one another, and that's always a bad thing. Because you can't emotionally detach from the intimate relationship as boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever it is that you were calling yourselves then, until you stop sleeping together. Until you stop greeting one another in the capacity of showing some level of affection. Right? As you once did. That has to stop. All of that has to stop. So you can't greet each other with a hug. You can't greet each other, you know, with the look, you know, that lost look, or that wandering eye look. Girl, you know, or boy, you know, we can. No, all that has to stop. And people may look at that as being insensitive. It's not being insensitive. Actually, it's being very sensitive to the situation. Because both of you know that you probably have done this before. This is probably not the first time that you have parted ways with one another. And you know, each time you made that attempt, what happened? That's why I'm not a believer of separation. Having gone through the process of separating from a relationship and returning back into the relationship to try it again, it's ridiculous. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of emotions. It's a waste of life. Because you already know what the outcome is going to be. The problem still hasn't been resolved. Even though you may sit down and have dialogue about what happened, oftentimes it's an after-the-fact discussion that has already driven you to the point of no return. So to go back into it and say, okay, we're going to try this again, no. It just doesn't work out that way. I don't care who you are, what you say. Once you get to the point where you're leaving, it's done. You're tired of it. And it's usually more than one thing. It's usually more than one thing that has gone unresolved. Most people don't just up and leave out of a relationship because of one incident. Now, granted, infidelity, well, yeah, that's a reason to walk away. That's certainly a reason to walk away, because you can't justify infidelity. You can't. You can't turn around and say, I made a mistake. You can't turn around and say, well, you know, it was during a time when we were really doing bad. Well, those were the times when you were really doing bad, when you should have stepped up and you should have did more, or you should have left then. Or you should have left then. And oftentimes we stay. So when you're to that point, when it's time to go, it's time to go. And you have to stay away. Now, staying away often means that you may have to have someone else pick up the children. You may have to have someone else make the call. And some will say, well, that's not good co-parenting. That's not a good way to co-parent. Sometimes it's the best way to begin the process of co-parenting. Because in order to understand what co-parenting is going to look like, you have to sit back for a minute and start seeing how things play out. You have to start seeing what it looks like to plan those visits. Right? The scheduling of different activities that the child may have been involved in that you were a part of. Right? Can the two of you attend functions together? Do you have to explain to the child that we may have to fall back and some things your mom will go to and some things your dad will go to? Those things that your mom was taking you to, you know, she asked me to assist with that process. And you assist. To be resistant to helping doesn't make sense. Because oftentimes what we forget is that the other parent, the primary caretaker now, the one that the child primarily lives with, is the one that has to assume a number of responsibilities in addition to the ones they used to. So they too have to make shifts. And oftentimes we'll get into that whole back and forth dialogue of, well, when we were together you did it, so why can't you do it now? Well, when we were together I had your help in other areas, so now those areas I have to cover myself. And we have to begin to look at those things. So what we have to begin to do now is fall back for a minute. Map out a plan. See how those things are beginning to unfold. And start looking at the plan that you established before leaving, and start looking at the plan from a reality-based way of thinking, such as what's happening right now. What do I have to do right now? And oftentimes that doesn't happen. Oftentimes what happens is one and or both parents are just angry and they begin to do things off of emotions. And anytime you make any decision or do anything off of emotions, it's always going to go wrong. Guaranteed. It will fail. So both parents need time. They need time to regroup from what just happened. They need time to process all that has happened. You know, think about it. All your hopes, dreams, and aspirations about having a child, raising a child with another person, or even just the whole idea of marriage and moving into a home and living together, you know, not necessarily the white picket fence and living up on a hill and a big lawn and all those other kind of things, but just the whole idea that you had within yourself. And each of you had an idea of what you wanted life to be like. So now you have to sit back and you have to process all these things, but now these things are not going to happen with that person. They're not going to happen with that person. So it's easy for someone to say, well, you need to put the children first, but you have to put yourself first. I've always been a strong believer in the fact that you have to save yourself first, then go back and save your family. So this is another one of those situations, and using that analogy, where you have to save yourself first. You have to sit back. You have to process your emotions. You have to work through the fact that now that you have made this decision, now that you have taken action, or now that someone has taken action in this situation, what's life going to be like? How am I going to pay, these bills? How am I going to make these things happen? But most importantly, I'm not going to be with this person anymore. I'm not going to smell their hair. I'm not going to smell their perfume. I'm not going to see them walking out the door in the morning and saying goodbye, or, see you later on, or have a good day. None of those things are going to happen anymore. And the same thing happens for the child. The same exact thing happens for the child. You used to tuck the child in at night. That's not going to happen for the child anymore. It's not going to happen anymore. The child has to begin to process this whole separation. The child has to process everything that you're processing as well. As a person, without sex, without all those things, but the whole intimacy of the environment, the conversations, the meals together, all these things have changed for the child as well. And you have to begin to think of what that child is going through. And many of us have already had the experience of parental separation. Many of us have already had the experience where one parent was not actively involved, or the constant arguing back and forth with both parents. Many of us have already endured that. And enduring that means that you have processed within yourself how you were going to get through life without the one parent being there. And it's been done. You have to look at all of those things. Now you have to begin to look at, how do you deal with this with the child? With the child. Because the whole premise of this whole parenting after the breakup really is weighing in on the plan. Because this is where so many situations fail. It's about a plan. How do I become a parent? What does being a parent from a distance look like? And does parenting from a distance have to look like I am distant? The phone calls should certainly be something that is encouraged. Daily phone calls, right? But in order to be able to make daily phone calls to the other parent, you have to establish a relationship of, I'm calling to keep the child balanced through all of this. If you call focusing on the person again, trying to resolve what has always been unresolved, or trying to resolve what it is that you're feeling, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And if you can't do that right now, it's okay. Have someone else call. If the child is old enough, give the child the phone number and allow the child to call. And ask the parent to allow the child to call. And you can ask the parent directly, or you can have someone else ask the parent to allow that phone call to happen. To always leave the lines of communication open to the child, to encourage the child to call, to encourage the child to visit. That's parenting. That's co-parenting. If the child decides that they want to go and visit the other parent, there should be no reason why that shouldn't happen, that can't happen. Doesn't matter that it's on a school night. What's an hour? What's an hour? 2 hours. That's also time that the other parent can help with homework. There's already an established time frame of when the child does certain things. With things. We already know that. We already know the child, is usually in bed 9, 10 o'clock. We already know that. So it would be unrealistic to expect for the other parent to allow the child to be out beyond that time, when you already know that's the time that these things happen. So it shouldn't have to be a matter of, when the child can visit, when the calls can happen. That should be wide open at any time. At any time. Now, when the other parent becomes foolish in their actions and they begin to pursue other conversations that are just like fruitless, then you have to take some other steps. And we talked about in a previous episode about the court system. But that should be the last thing you have to do. There are too many people in both of your lives that something can't be worked out for the benefit of the child. We also have to look at some of the mental health things that challenges that begin to present during the course of this separation. Sometimes we forget about what depression actually looks like. We forget. A person may start taking more time off from work. A person may not answer the phone as frequently as they used to. That's not the time for you to get angry. That's not the time for you to get upset. That's not the time for you to begin to label the person as being deceitful, malicious, and all those other things. You have to begin to understand. Again, you can't go into this trying to satisfy yourself. You have to be patient. And when you find yourself becoming impatient or intolerant, then you have to begin again to step back and take a different approach to this. And oftentimes what happens is we forget that we can, at any given time, we can withdraw from the situation. It's nothing wrong with retreating, right? And trying to find another way in. Oftentimes what we do is we keep hammering away. We keep hammering away. We keep hammering away at the situation, and we make it worse. And then things are said. Then things are done that are hurtful to all involved. And oftentimes the child is a part of the situation, but the child is not involved. But as we continue to hammer away at trying to get the result that we want, now we involve the child. The child has to begin to make decisions as to what parent to be with, what parent not to be with, what parent to tell certain things, what parent not to tell certain things. And sometimes parents tend to use children as agents, little spies. Who's over there? What are they doing? How long are they there? Do they spend the night? Where do they live? What do they look like? What do they do? You got to move past all of those things. Life should be just as it was when you were living together in terms of parenting. In terms of parenting. That should still look the same. We change what it looks like because of our own unresolved. That's what happens. And then we want the child to understand, but this is an adult situation that you want a child to understand. A child can't understand why the two of you have this unresolved within you. And all the unresolved is not just from that relationship. The unresolved also is a carryover from previous relationships. Again, more unresolved stacked on to current unresolved only makes for a more volatile situation. And we have to always look at these things. And these are the last things that we look at. Why? Because when we're in our stuff, we want to be in our stuff. We don't seek help. We don't go to our religious leaders, your imam, your pastor. You don't go to those people and say, hey, listen, I'm in a situation here and I need help. I've done all the praying, but I still can't work through this. So I need help. We don't go to others who have been in a similar situation and get help from them. We want to make our situation unique. Well, every separation has some commonality. Every separation, every divorce has some commonality in it. Every last one of them. So when you go to others and you begin to get help from them, it makes things a whole lot easier. But when you attempt to go through this on your own, through all your unresolved, through all your hatefulness, your anger, your rage, because one more time you're in this situation, you'll never get anywhere. And the child continues to suffer. When we look around us and we see all the things that are going on in our society today, these things have more to do with the social ills outside of the family than inside the family. And I say this because you have to look at what our economy looks like. You have to look at what the educational system currently looks like. You have to look at job opportunities. You have to look at peers. It's so many things you have to look at that you have always protected your child from. And now you have become part of the statistics and also part of the social ills outside of the child that the child needs to deal with. And then they have to deal with the internal loss, the grief related to the separation. All of those things. So again, if you don't get your own self together, if you don't get help for yourself in dealing with your situation, how can you possibly go back and be healthy in getting your child back on track? You can't. You can't. See, oftentimes we try to make this an easy fix. And it's not an easy fix. No way in the world is this going to be easy. I don't care how mature you are. Hurt feelings are just that. They're hurt feelings. They don't feel like the good ones. They make people uncomfortable. They make life difficult. They cause you to do certain things that you would typically not do if you had good feelings. The good feelings that you once had when this relationship started out. How many times do you reach back and grab that point of time between the two of you? Why is it we gravitate more towards the end and what brought us to an end when we already know what brought us to an end? But why don't we go back? When people die, what's the first thing we do? We talk about the good times we had with those people. We talk about all those events that we attended together. We talked about the things that they did that made us laugh. We talk about all those things. We remember them well. So why is it we don't do the same exact thing when we separate from a failed relationship? And it all has to do with perception. That person is still alive. I still have to see that person. I still have to be reminded of that hurt. No, you don't. That's a choice. That is a choice. You choose to be reminded of the negative aspects of that failed relationship, instead of remembering what it was like when the two of you met, how life was when the two of you were dating, how life was when you were going out dancing, when y'all sat down and y'all played card games together, board games together, watched a movie together, snuggled up, went out there and dug the cars out together and all those kind of things. Why do you choose not to go there? Why do you choose not to look at those things? That will actually help you along the way to remember that this is just a situation with two good people with a bad ending. And sometimes it is that way. Sometimes you can just find yourself with the person who served a purpose for your life at the time that they did. But you made a choice to utilize that person in another capacity. You were once lonely when that person came along. The way you handle loneliness is what you have to look at. You found companionship, which eventually turned into sex between the two of you. What were you actually looking for? Were you looking for a companionship? Were you looking for someone, to just hang out with, just to kick it with a little bit, to enjoy a movie with, or, just enjoy occasional lunch or dinner, out at a restaurant with because you don't want to do it alone? What was the real reason for it? There's a reason, a season, and a time for everyone who enters into our lives. It didn't say that that person was going to be the father of your child, the mother of your child. It didn't say any of those things. That's what you added into the equation. I remember somebody saying to me something about when you buy a car. When you buy a car and you put all these aftermarket parts on your car, sometimes you really bring the value down in the car. When you leave the car in its condition, it is of more value it is of more value. Same way with a person. When you begin to add other things to a person which they are incapable of providing to you, you try to force that upon them. You want them to be this way. You want them to be that way. You try to force it upon them. Excuse me. What's the likelihood of them adapting what it is that you're suggesting? Are they going to be able to adapt? And if they aren't able to adapt, how do you deal with that? It's our own expectation that we have of people which really causes our relationships to fail. Because somebody's not acting in a certain way, you can always make a decision to move on. Do you have to become hurtful? Do you have to make them feel like they're less than? Oftentimes that is the direction we go in, not intentionally. Because we fall in love, as we call it. And when you start looking at what love looks like and how we define love and, what it is we do with love, and once we're in love, what happens with us internally, how we begin to change ourselves and we begin to do things differently, we begin to accept certain things, but then, somewhere along the line, love changes. It changes. Sometimes people want to use the analogy of, we outgrew each other. Did you outgrow one another, or did you just not grow together? You can't outgrow a person. You can not grow together, but you can't outgrow a person. You can't grow faster than a person. It's just like saying that we plant two trees and one tree grows, 6 inches, every month, and the other tree seems to grow 3 inches every month. Does that mean that we've outgrown one another? No. We grow at our own pace. Sometimes what happens is people are comfortable where they are. So when you separate, a person goes through their grief process at their own pace, and you have to allow them to go at their own pace, and you can't hurry that person up so they can be where you are, or you can't bash that person upside their head because they're not where you are. And you keep constantly going at them. You need to let that go. You need to let that go. People often say that, and they say it real quick. But as soon as they're in a relationship and their relationship fails, and you're telling them to do the same exact thing, they have a different perspective. And anybody who parts ways with any relationship that they have been in, I don't care how long the relationship was, how short the relationship was, if you were involved with the person and you guys just part ways, y'all break up, to sit back and say that you moved on, you were never in it. You were never in it. So you have to reevaluate how the relationship began and how it ended. And ask yourself, was it already a relationship that was destined to end anyway? But you remained. So there's a lot of planning that goes into place when parting ways. And even more planning goes into place when you part ways. You have to really begin to take a look at what it is that you want, what's best for you first. You can't eliminate the child from that equation because that's your child. But you do have to turn around and look at what do you want this situation to look like from your perspective for the benefit of the child. Plan first. Always plan first. Because when you plan first, the outcome is going to be so much better. I hope this episode and a previous episode helped. Tune in next week for Side Spot. I look forward to you listening and also watching, because these episodes are also recorded and on YouTube at the Daddy's Right Here YouTube educational station. You can go to the website www.daddy'srighthere.com daddysrighthere.net, and that's daddysrighthere.net. daddysrighthere.net. And you can listen to the episodes. There are about 83 episodes of SodSpot, and there are about 48, 49 videos that you can watch of SodSpot, and also my other show, The Wise View. Peace.